My name is Eric Sampson. I'm 35 years old, and I'm looking at my newborn daughter through the viewing window at the maternity ward. Her mom is resting comfortably, and I'm waiting for a nurse to come out and suit me up so I can hold my daughter again. For some reason, the nurses always want to put me and other visitors in scrubs and clean us up before they allow us to touch the baby. I guess it makes sense because I wouldn't want anything to happen to my precious little angel before she starts her life. They suit me up, and I lift her from the nurse's arms. I marvel again at the absolute beauty of the wrinkled little person in my arms. From the first second that I saw her, I loved her more than anything else on this planet, whether she knew it or not. I could already imagine the person she was going to turn out to be. I was so ready to watch her grow and help her along her life's journey. No matter what happens, her mom and I will be there, guiding her along the way. After a half hour that seemed like only a few seconds, I gave her back to the nurse. As I stepped out of the room, I noticed a very attractive blonde woman waiting for me. My happiness evaporated, and my smile transformed into a grimace. "Mr. Sampson," said the security guard, "we don't normally let people into the maternity area unless they're family, but this woman said she was related to you." "It's okay," I told him. "Unfortunately, she's my wife." "How's being married to a woman who looks like that unfortunate?" he asked. "Trust me, that witch is bat crazy," I said just loud enough for him alone to hear. "You looked really good in there holding your baby," said Andrea, stepping up to me. "You're going to be a great father, but I think you should reconsider your actions. This divorce isn't going to happen no matter what you try. I'll block it any way I can. We need to sit down and talk. Us throwing rocks at each other through our lawyers is only making them rich. Can we just talk? Just for a few minutes. Andrea, my wife, is beautiful, spoiled, and curious. She's used to getting her way no matter what happens and simply can't accept it when things don't go her way. Andrea is about 5 feet 7 inches, weighs about 120 well-shaped pounds. At 36, she has a bikini body, a nice trim waist with beautiful long tapering legs. Her features are a little sharp, but she has the bluest eyes you will ever see. She's also a woman that loves sex. She is definitely not a tease or an ice maiden. That's the unfortunate part. "I have to be there when Melissa wakes up," I told her. "That gives us about an hour for your talk. Let's go to the visitors' lounge. We should have some privacy there, unless you try to turn this into another shouting match. But remember, you're the one who wants to talk. So if you start yelling or giving me any of your nonsense, I'll have them throw you the heck out of here." We got to the lounge and sat down in chairs near the back. "It's your show, Andy. So say what you have to say and let's get it over with." She licked her lips and started talking. "Well, first off, I wanted to tell you that I forgive you for cheating on me. I forgive you for breaking the rules we established for our relationship. I forgive you for getting another woman pregnant and running off with her. I want us to put all of this behind us. And I want you to come home with me so we can get our marriage back on track. I do realize that you'll have to pay some kind of child support to Melissa for the baby. But I'm thinking that you should limit the time that you spend with that child so it's not hard for you to choose between it and our children. I love you, Eric. I've never loved anyone else except you. So I'm willing to overlook everything you did and take you back. I also promise that no mention of this will ever be made. We'll just move forward. I won't try to hold this over your head or anything else. Let's just say this was all a big mistake and erase it from our memory. Melissa always wanted a baby more than anything else, and Mike couldn't give her one. So if we get back together, everyone wins." "Oh, Andy, could we really do that?" I asked with mock sincerity. "You're giving me a get-out-of-jail-free card. Just this once?" She smiled, nodding her head and reaching for me. "I'll never lose you for anything, and I won't share you. You're mine forever. I'd kill Melissa before I'd let her have you." I pulled back from her as if she were on fire. "Kick rocks, you stupid witch," I snapped at her, then got up and walked away. I realized then that Andy should never have been released. She was still crazy. I went down the hall to Melissa's room. I smiled at the nurse and pointed at the door. "She's going to be asleep for a while," the nurse said to me quietly. "I can't think of any place I'd rather be," I said. I want to be the first person she sees when she wakes up. The nurse smiled again and waved as I went into the room. Melissa was lying on her side, turned towards me. I pulled the covers closer around her and sat down in the chair beside the bed. She was beautiful even sleeping. That has to come from an inner beauty. God knows Andy was beautiful on the outside, but she looked like a screeching shrew when she was asleep. Somehow, when she wasn't conscious, her inner ugliness just shone through her mask of sexy facial expressions. As I looked at Melissa's beatific, slumbering face, the past 16 months just rolled away. I'm a successful architect, and Andy and I were just moving into a house we'd built. Some of the neighbors were upset about our house at first because we'd purchased 2 adjoining lots and torn down the existing ranch-styled homes on them. Then we built our dream home on the site and re-landscaped it. I guess our house was kind of big compared to the other homes in the neighborhood, but it was the house of our dreams where we could grow old together and someday raise our family. It took a while for a lot of the neighbors to come around, but Mike and Melissa came over to meet us the very first day we moved in. They lived right next door to us, and you could look into their kitchen from our deck. Mike was kind of burly but with a slight paunch and constantly had a 2-day beard growth. Melissa was very cheerful and, while not in Andy's league, was really pretty. Melissa was short at about 5 foot even, and her body, while not like Andy's bikini babe, tall thin figure, was very interesting. She had large jugs and a big round bum. Her waistline, unfortunately, was also kind of thick. If it hadn't been for that gut, her body would have been incredible. They brought over pizza and beer, and we spent that first night getting to know them. It was the first of many nights we'd spend either on our deck, in our pool, or in our living room. Over the next few months, we became the best of friends. Mike and I often went bowling or golfing on the weekends. We were always driving around in either his pickup truck or my hopped-up Mustang GT. I love that car. It has custom paint, a Flowmaster exhaust system, and too many other modifications to talk about. If you saw the car, you'd think it was just like any other red Mustang with stripes along the lower body panels. On closer inspection, you'd notice that the stripes are the outlines of buildings that I designed. It is a beautiful car, and I love it to this day. It's going to be weird putting a baby seat in the back, but you do what you have to. A lot of nights, we'd all just hang out either at Mike and Mel's place or at ours. Mike, just like every other guy I'd ever known, couldn't seem to keep his eyes off Andy. Whether she was just hanging out in jeans or in one of her bikinis, my wife is an eyeful. "Have you ever thought about swinging?" Mike asked me one night when the women were off doing something. "We don't have a swing back here, but maybe that's a good idea," I said. "No, you dope, I'm talking about, trying out someone else's stuff. Can really put the spice back in your relationship. After being married for a long time, even the best relationships can get kinda stale. Even when you're eating steak every night, you sometimes want to try a little chicken or some fish, if you know what I mean." "Nope, I don't know what you mean. I'll see you later, Mike," I said, getting up. When I got to bed that evening, Andy asked me why I was so upset. "Nothing to worry about," I told her. "Mike just said something really stupid." I rolled over and grabbed Andy and started tickling her. While she laughed uncontrollably, I pulled my fur-covered handcuffs from under the pillow, where I'd hidden them. Before Andy realized what was happening, I'd snapped one cuff over her left wrist, then wrapped the cuffs around the bedpost and snapped the other cuff around her right wrist. "What are you doing, Eric?" she said, her eyes as big as saucers. I reached down and grabbed a thick scarf that I'd laid on the bed. I tied one of her legs to the footpost on the bed and the other to the bed frame. My beautiful wife was now tied up, spread eagle on our bed. I opened a drawer on the nightstand and pulled out a large feather and a can of spray lube that was supposed to warm up when blown on or touched. Andy could hear me moving around in the darkness, but she couldn't see what I was doing. I started out by gently running the feather lightly across her shoulder and down her arm. She shivered at the unexpected sensation. "Eric, stop that," she said, but the tone of her voice told me that she wanted me to continue. I sprayed the lube across her jugs and up both legs, with a final squirt on her shaved box. "Eric," she said again, stretching my 2-syllable name into a much longer word. She started trying to move her legs together and couldn't. I blew gently on her left jug, causing the spray to begin to warm up. "Oh, please do that again," she said. I blew on the other jug, and the pungent and musky aroma of Andy's arousal filled my nostrils. I started fingering her as I continued licking, and she was still sensitive from the first one. "No, please stop," she said, but I kept going, knowing that she really didn't want me to stop. "Eric, you'd better get up here and screw me before I pass out," she screamed. Who am I to argue with a lady? I quickly took off my shorts and shirt and started out by straddling her. I kneeled by her head and let my tool dangle right in front of her face. I kept fingering her as I did this. She started whining. "Eric, I'm begging you," she said. "I'll do anything you want. My box is on fire. Screw me, dang it." So I did. I slipped my tool into her and started screwing her. After she came for what must have been the third time, I untied the leg that was tied to the bed frame and flipped her over. "You like it," I said mirthfully. "You should have warned me so I could open my mouth," she said. "Now it's all wasted." "It's wasted anyway as long as you're on the pill," I said quietly. Then I untied her other leg and uncuffed her hands. I lay down on the bed and pulled the covers over me. The mood was gone. She rolled over to me and tried to kiss me, but I just turned my head. Andy knew that it wasn't the fact that she had my cum all over her face that caused me to pull away. She lay down beside me and said, "Eric, don't worry. There's no one else in the world that I want to have kids with. There's no one else that I love. I just want to enjoy ourselves for a few years before I have to wreck my body with stretch marks, sagging jugs, and fat bumps. I swear to you we have all the time in the world. I'm going to spend the rest of my life married to you. I swear it," she said. "We're going to be happy and have the best family ever, just not right now." She wrapped her arms around me and we went to sleep. Andy, since we'd been together, had a habit of sleeping with one leg and one arm over me. She claimed that it had become a habit, and she couldn't get to sleep without me. Andy and I had sex every night and some mornings without fail. She had a very high sex drive and enjoyed all kinds of sex. Whatever it was, it didn't matter as long as she got off. We were usually all over each other, and I loved her so much that I had trouble believing it sometimes. I went to work every day, making the long commute in my Mustang. Andy stayed home and took care of the house. Melissa and I waved to each other often as she drove off in her old Honda every morning. Mike was between jobs, so he stayed home. I was glad of that because it meant that, in an emergency, Andy had someone to call who could get to the house far faster than I could. A few weeks after my conversation with Mike about swinging, it came up again. This time it was Andy who brought it up. "Eric," she said, "have you ever wanted to try another woman?" "Hell no," I spat. "I love you, and you're enough for me." "Well, I'm not saying that I want you to go out and just screw some stranger. I'm just saying that maybe we should bring someone else in with us," she said. "It's just something I'm curious about. Besides, we're almost there anyway," she said. "Andy, what are you talking about?" I asked sharply. "Haven't you noticed the last few times that Mike and Mel came over? You and I started kissing, and Mike and Mel started kissing too. And then you started fingering me through the hole in my shorts until I came all over your fingers. Baby," she said. "Well, while you were doing it, Mike was staring at me, and I was just kind of wondering." "Wondering what?" I snapped. "Well, what it would be like," she said quietly. "Be more specific," I said sharply. Andy wasn't used to the edge in my tone, and she backed away from me a little bit. I don't think she was ever afraid of me hurting her because, God knows, I'd die before I ever hit her, but she just wasn't accustomed to me not instantly giving her what she wanted. Let me give you an example. After I'd gotten my first commission and did a great job on it, my then bosses gave me a substantial raise and a bonus. My vision for the money was for us to put it away to start saving for a house. Andy brought me home papers to sign the next day for her BMW. The down payment alone wiped out the bonus, and the monthly note would definitely tax my income. That car cost more than the house we were living in at the time. The end result was that we ate tuna for a month, but Andy got her car. "Be more specific, Andrea. I want to make sure that I understand you clearly," I said again. What you're asking me for is for you to have sex with another man, right? Well, not another man. Just Mike, she said quickly. No, I said sharply. Wait, I'm sorry, that didn't come out the way I wanted it to. No, never in this life. I screamed as loudly as I could. At that moment, for the first time since I'd met her, I couldn't stand to look at my wife. I got up, knocked the chair I'd been sitting in over, and left the room. A few hours later, after I'd gone out for a run and cooled down, I went into the kitchen and saw Andy there, seated at the kitchen table, eating her dinner. Here, I'll get you a plate, honey, she said. I walked past her without saying anything, got a beer out of the fridge, and went out onto the deck. I'd always loved the view from this deck. It was part of the reason why it was included in my design. I looked over and saw Melissa sitting at her kitchen table, grading papers probably, and wondered if she knew what my wife, her supposed friend, had proposed. She probably didn't have a clue. Melissa was a pretty woman. Not in Andy's class, of course, but she just needed to take better care of herself. If she got rid of that gut and toned up a little bit, she'd be pretty hot. I couldn't believe my mind was wandering so much as I watched the moon from my deck. I guess I wanted to think about anything other than Andy's suggestion. I knew before I married her that Andy had an extremely high sex drive. I'd always thought that I was enough for her. We were both pretty compatible sexually, I always thought. Andy brought the willingness to do it anytime and anywhere, and I brought the imagination and creativity. She never knew what to expect from me. From candles and roses to me tying her up and spanking her. But she did know that whatever we tried, it was always done with love and affection. Obviously, she was starting to need more. I think that she saw this as just another little thing for her to beg for and try to get her way on. I saw it as far more serious. To me, it was the first sign that we were drifting apart, and I loved her so much that it just broke my heart. It's a really beautiful night out. It's warm, and that big old moon is really lighting everything up, she said from behind me. Is there anybody here who'd like to try skinny dipping in our pool with me? Or should we just take this upstairs? She came up behind me and wrapped her arms around me. Andrea, let go of me. I came out here to be alone so I could think. But it's your house too, so if you want the deck, I'll go somewhere else, I said. I'll go sit by the pool. Is that far enough from you? She snapped. Not nearly. I snapped right back at her. I got up, went back inside the house, and grabbed my keys from the island in the center of the large chef's kitchen. Before Andy could react, I was out the front door and driving away. My Mustang's exhaust system and V8 growl alerted the neighborhood that I was out and about. I seemed to just drive forever that night, and though it made me feel better, I knew that it wasn't going to make my problem go away. I say my problem because, even though Andy was the one who was messing up our marriage, it literally hurt me to do anything that displeased her. Over the course of one stupid evening, I'd yelled at her, cursed at her, and walked away from her. I'd never, in all our time together, done even one of those things. Usually, when we argued, our pattern was different. We'd compromise and I'd bend a little more and a little more until I either agreed with her or she got her way. Andy was my soul, so in some ways, giving her what she wanted pleased me as well. Andy's smile made me feel good inside, especially when I'd done something to cause it. There was simply no way for me to ever share her with anyone else, not even temporarily. I'd always been paranoid about her love for me. I remember the first time we visited her family. I was jealous of the time she spent with her brother and sisters. I needed to have her all to myself. Her dad had even commented once that his usual warning to the men who dated his daughters wasn't necessary in my case. Son, he said. I'm calling you son because I'm sure you're going to end up marrying my daughter. She loves you, and she'd be a fool to let you get away. Normally, I tell guys that if they hurt my little girls, I'll track them down and kill them myself. But in your case, I have a far different warning. I know that you love Andrea, but remember, you can tell her no from time to time. It'll actually make your relationship stronger in the end. If you keep on going the way you are now, sooner or later, she's going to ask you for something that you aren't ready to give her, without giving up a piece of your soul. By that point, it will be too late because she won't be used to you not giving in on anything. You're a good man, he told me. Andrea needs that, but don't let her turn you into something that you don't want to be. I'll never do anything to hurt her, I told him. I'm not worried about you hurting her, he said. You clearly love her too much for that. I'm more worried about her hurting you. The next morning, I was on my way out of the house for my commute to the office when Andy came out of our bedroom. She looked like hell. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she just looked off. Where the heck were you? She snapped. You know I can't sleep without you. I got back around one, I said calmly. I just drove around for a while to clear my head and to think. What would you need to think about? Why didn't you come to bed? She asked. I slept in one of the first-floor guest rooms, I said and walked past her. I barely got any work done that day. Andy called me twice on my way to work and then started texting me. The first thing my secretary, Myrna, told me as I walked into my office was to call Andy ASAP. I didn't, and 10 minutes later my cell phone rang. What is it, Andrea? I asked. Whether you know it or not, my job is not just an extension of home. I have work to do here. That's why I come here. What's wrong with you? She asked softly. Don't you love me anymore? We'll talk when I get home. Please don't call me anymore today. I hung up the phone and started trying to work, but I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. The thing I kept coming back to was Andy. I looked up the cost of bricks versus siding for a project I was working on. Before I could finish the math, I was wondering what my life would be like without Andy in it. I ended up doing the same calculation 4 times and never finished it. I turned on my computer and switched to a project where I could just draw. The house I was working on was for a single guy. He was a high-profile lawyer and wanted something really different. I come up with a design that blew his socks off. The house was mostly underground. The only thing visible above the surface was a large sunroom. The house had already been built and was nearly ready for occupation. I just needed to finish the designs for the landscaping. Drawing wasn't a good idea either, though. I couldn't even connect 2 lines without thinking about Andy. I went out to lunch with a couple of clients and one of my partners to discuss a prospective commercial project that would make a lot of money for all of us. I still found myself wondering what Andy was wearing and what she was doing at that moment. Did she still love me? Where had I gone wrong? Could I possibly undo whatever I'd done to make her need someone else? What did Mike have that I didn't? When I got home that night, I was ready to talk to Andy, but it didn't happen. As soon as I stepped into the house, I smelled steaks on the grill. I walked through the kitchen and out onto the deck and saw Andy in one of her bikinis and Mike grilling on my Weber. Melissa was sitting at the table grading papers. She was wearing a dark-colored one-piece swimsuit. Her legs under the table looked far better than I'd expected, and her chest, as she leaned over the table concentrating on the papers she graded, was amazing. I think my look at her was more one of curiosity than lust because, though I'd noticed that her body was better than I'd ever thought, I wasn't aroused by it. I went back into my bedroom and changed into a pair of jeans, comfortable shoes, and a t-shirt. Hey, shouldn't you be putting on a swimsuit? Smiled Andy. Why? I asked. Well, honey, we're all hanging out at the pool, and we usually just wear swim stuff. Even fuddy-duddy Melissa is wearing a swimsuit, she said, smiling. The smile quickly faded when she saw that I wasn't smiling. Eric, I was just joking. You know I love Melissa. She's like my best friend. I know you're tired after all of that work. So just come on down. You can wear whatever you'd like. Your steak is almost ready. If you hurry, you can eat it fresh off the grill the way you like it. Andy went back out to the pool. I heard her say, he was just getting changed. He'll be right down. I went back out the front door. I don't think they even realized that I was leaving until they heard my Mustang's loud exhaust system. I drove down by the lake and stopped off at a Burger King on the way. I parked in front of the lake and ate my double Whopper with cheese while I played some games on my iPad. After I ate, I read a few stories about swingers on one of those internet websites. I had nothing against people who wanted to trade partners, but it just wasn't for me. I got out of the car and spent some time throwing rocks into the lake. During the evening, I saw several attractive single women pass by, either alone or in groups. A few of them looked at me, One or two even started walking my way and attempted to start a conversation. I think my body language and the fact that I held my wedding ring up to punctuate every sentence gave them the impression I wanted them to get. They quickly backed off and left me alone. The thing that upset me the most was, as the sun went down, seeing several couples who were clearly in love, walking hand in hand along the waterfront. As they smiled at each other, hugged, or stopped for a kiss, I wanted to shoot every one of them. My jealousy over what they had and what I'd probably lost made me want to go up to each guy and tell him something. Run away from this witch as fast as you can before she rips your heart out. I'd say, sure, it's great now, but is it really worth the pain you'll go through when this woman decides you're not enough for her and she wants to be with your friends? I stayed out a little longer that night. It was closer to 2 a.m. when I got home. Andy was lying on the couch in the living room with a blanket. As softly as I closed the door, it still woke her up. Her eyes were red again. She'd clearly been crying. I didn't say a word to her. I didn't want to upset her any further, so I just turned and headed up the stairs. "Eric, what is wrong with you?" she shouted. "Just yesterday and for the past 10 years, you've been all over me. And now you can't even stand to be in the same room with me. It's like I'm a piece of dirt on your shoe, and you're just trying to scrape me off." "Andrea, I have no intention of trying to speak to you while you're screaming at me," I said. "I came home with the intention of trying to talk to you, but you needed to have a party. You wanted to talk to me so badly while I was at work. But once I got home, that need just evaporated. I need to get some sleep because I still have to go to work tomorrow. So why don't you pencil in an appointment for me on your busy schedule? We'll talk then." "What party?" she asked. "It was just Mike and Melissa. We see them most nights anyway. They practically live here. What is wrong with you? Don't you love me anymore?" "Yes, Andy, I love you. I've always loved you. I guess that's the problem with us, isn't it?" I said. "Once again, I have to work tomorrow. I need sleep. Why don't you call Myrna and set up an appointment for us to talk?" I headed back down the stairs to get away from her. I was really proud of myself for my restraint. "Where are you going?" "Our bedroom is up here," she snapped. The only sounds audible through the house as I fell asleep were the sound of the downstairs guest room door closing and Andy sobbing. The next evening, Andy was waiting for me at the kitchen table. There was something cooking in the oven, and the house smelled great from whatever it was. "Can we talk now?" she asked. I sat down at the table across from her. "Eric, what is going on with us?" she asked. "One day, we're the perfect couple, and I'm sure above everything else that you love me. The next day, you can't stand to even look at me. We haven't had sex in 2 days, and while that doesn't seem out of the ordinary for most couples, for us, that's an eternity. I miss you. I'm going crazy. I want us back like we're supposed to be." "Andy, that may not be possible," I said. "Why not?" she asked. "What did you do? Did something happen while you were out driving around?" "Andy, I didn't do anything, other than drive around alone. You messed us up," I snapped. She shook her head. "I didn't do anything," she said. "So you don't think telling me you want to be with some other guy hurt us?" I snapped. "You don't think that my being not enough for you hurt us? I've read stories about open marriages and swingers, Andy. They rarely ever turn out happy. In most cases, they only start the couple down the road to divorce. Not all of them end up in divorces, but a bigger percentage of them break up than stay together. It's especially true in the cases where only one partner wants to swing. Anything that swings open also swings closed. That's what this is all about," she said, laughing. "I've been going through 2 days of hell thinking you don't love me anymore because of something I was curious about. Curiosity killed a cat, Andy. I really thought that was over with," she said. "You said no, I let it drop. End of subject. But nope. You need to go off and stew over it and sulk like a baby. After listening to Mike talk about it, I just wondered, especially after that last time we were all together, what it would be like. You're the only guy I've ever been with. You know how much I enjoy sex, and I just wanted to know if all guys are the same. It's not like I'm going to fall in love with Mike. He's a lazy good-for-nothing slob, and he'd be the best person for me to try out anyway. So you decided to try this out after talking to Mike?" I said. That figures. He asked me about it about 2 weeks ago, and I turned him down flat. I guess one of us thinks our marriage means something, and now we know which one. Mike doesn't care about your sexual awakening or your curiosity. He just wants to be with you. He's stuck with Melissa, who, while a very nice woman, is kind of dowdy. He starts seeing you walking around half-naked all the time and decides to see if he can get into your pants. I guess that makes you feel special or curious. Huh. That's probably not all there is to it, but it's one of the reasons I thought about Mike. She snapped. I did want to try someone else out, and I picked Mike because he is no danger to us. He's your best friend, so he wouldn't try to take advantage of the situation. I'm not attracted to him, so I'm not going to want him. It's only going to be one time and you'll be there. Maybe you can satisfy your curiosity with Melissa. And Mike shoots blanks. There is no way he could get me pregnant. Oh, you made a list, I said. Eric, this isn't about us. I don't want to be with anyone except you for the rest of my life. I want us to grow old together like we planned. I'm not going to fall in love with Mike and leave you. It's not about you not being enough for me. It's only sex. There's a big difference between love and sex. No, Andy, I said. I thought you loved me, she said. I guess I was wrong. You're full of nonsense and you always have been. Oh, Andy, I love you. You say it so much it's like a broken record. But the one time I need something from you that's a little bit out there, you shut me down. It's only going to be one time. No, I said. That's just like you, she snapped. You're so selfish. All you ever think about is what you want. I don't matter. If not letting you be with some guy is being selfish, then I guess I am, I told her. Andy, I do love you. I love you way too much to ever want to share you with anyone else. That's what I mean about being selfish, she snapped. You just don't know how to share. We've been together for 10 years. We probably have sex at least 7 or 8 times a week, if not more. From the day we got together, no one else has ever touched me. That's 7 or 8 times 52 weeks in a year, which is about 400 times a year at least. Multiply that by 10 years and you've been with me over 4,000 times, Eric. I was just asking to let someone else do it once. If the only reason we're together is because no one else gets to be with me, our relationship is pretty sad. I didn't say anything. I was done talking. You know I could have gone out and done this behind your back and not said anything, she said. I could have gone out, found some guy, and been with him to satisfy my curiosity and never told you. You would never have known. But I tried to be honest with you, and look what it got me. It's great to know that you trust me, Eric. What's that expression? Love without trust means nothing. I came to you and tried to talk to you about my feelings, and this is what I get. Thanks for nothing, Eric, but it's my body, so I get to make this decision. Good night, Andrea, I said. Wait, Eric, I don't want this talk to end this way. We have to come to some kind of solution, she said. I'm going out for a run, I told her. Andrea, you're a grown woman. Do what you have to do. But if you do, make sure you can handle the consequences of what you do, because this conversation may not be the only thing ending around here. Where are you going? She screamed. We're not done. We might just be, I said. I changed my clothes and went out to run. When I got back from my run, I was sweaty, but I felt better. I got into the shower and turned the water on. I didn't notice that Andy had joined me until I heard the door close. She rubbed her hands down my back. I moved away from her as quickly as I could. Andy, this house has 3 bathrooms. Find another one, I said, pushing her away from me. I showered while Andy sat there with a shocked look on her face. Then I got dressed. Are you ready to finish our talk? She asked. Our talk is over, I said. See you later. If you walk out that door, I'm going to be with Mike, she said. Andy, you're going to anyway. You had your mind made up before we even started talking. I don't even know why you felt you needed to tell me, I said as I looked at her. She looked down at the floor and couldn't meet my eyes. I wish you could understand what I'm going through and just let me have this one thing. It won't mean anything, she said. If you do it, Andy, things with us will never be the same. I can't watch you all the time, so I hope your curiosity is worth our marriage. But like you said, it's your body and your decision, I said. Maybe you're the one who's throwing us away with your stubbornness, she said. The only reply I made was slamming the door on my way out. That night, I came home early and went to bed in the guest room, as I'd been doing for most of the week. Andy knocked on the door at about midnight, saying she wanted to talk. I'd locked the door so she couldn't get in, and when I heard her, I pretended to be asleep. The next day, my world started to fall apart. I got home at the usual time and noticed that instead of sitting in her kitchen grading her papers, Melissa was sitting on her front porch doing it. "Hi, Mel," I shouted. She looked up at me and looked awful. She was crying her eyes out. I went over to her to see what was going on, and I knew. "I couldn't sit in the kitchen and watch them out on your deck," she said through her tears. I stormed into the house and saw Mike getting ready to dive into my pool. Just as he leaped into the air, arcing for the water, I kicked him right in the face as hard as I could. He fell into the water and spluttered out a mouthful of it. His nose was busted, and blood was pouring down his face. "Get out of my house," I told him. "Don't ever come back." "Hey, buddy, calm down. It's over and done with." She wanted it. She was the one who suggested it in the first place. She told me you were okay with it, so I went for it. Who wouldn't? "Don't make me have to ask you to leave again," I said. "I won't be nearly as nice the second time." I turned and saw Andy coming out of the house. She hadn't heard anything that happened with Mike and me. She ran up to me smiling. "I told you it wouldn't mean anything," she said. "Now that it's over, we can go back to normal." I pulled out my iPhone and called a local taxi company and gave them our address. "The taxi should be here in about 10 minutes. That's how long you have to pack your things," I said. "If you're here a minute after that, I'm throwing you in the street in your bikini." "Eric, what's going on?" she asked. "We're done, Andy. It's over. You can go to your parents' house, a motel, or stay with Mike." "I don't care. Just get out of my house," I screamed at her. "Please, Eric, it's over. It won't happen again," she whined. "You told me last night to go ahead and do it. I knew you weren't happy about it, but you just told me to go ahead so I could get this out of my system and we could get back to us." "Andy, maybe that's what you heard, but it's not what I said. You were the one who said that if I walked out the door, you were going to be with Mike. I said that you were probably going to do it anyway. That was not me giving you permission. Since this whole idea came up, I have let you know that I was against it. I also warned you that if it was something you needed to do, you should be ready for the consequences. These are the consequences. You now have 6 minutes left to pack your things before the taxi gets here." "I don't need a taxi," she said. "I'll drive my BMW to my parents' house. When you get your head out of your rear, that's where I'll be. Andy, the car is in my name. If you take it, I'll report it stolen, and you will be in jail before nightfall," I said. She looked at my face and saw that I was serious and ran into the house crying. A few minutes later, the taxi pulled up. "Hey buddy, did someone from here call a cab?" asked the driver. I just nodded my head. "Andy, your ride is here," I screamed. "If he leaves, you're going to have to walk." I gave the driver 100 and told him to take her anywhere she wanted to go. Andy came out of the house carrying a hastily packed overnight bag. "You should have packed a lot more than that. You're not coming back," I told her. "Please, Eric, we need to talk." She whined to my rapidly receding back. A few minutes after the cab pulled away, Andy started calling me. I turned my phone off and shut off the ringers on all of the phones in the house. I went outside on the deck and sat down. As badly as I felt, there was someone who felt worse. "Come, Mel, misery loves company," I said. "We're going out to eat." She didn't say anything. She just sat there. So I grabbed her arm and pulled her up and stuck her in the Mustang's front passenger seat. We drove around until I found what looked like a nice restaurant. I ordered for both of us, got the food to go, and got back into my car. I drove us out to the lake, the same place I'd been driving to every night anyway. We ate in silence, and then all of a sudden Mel started unloading on me. "Why would he?" "Well, I know why he would, but why would she do that to you? Are they crazy? I know that Mike has no respect for me, but I thought that Andrea loved you. I'm sure she does. All she ever talks about is you, Eric this, Eric that. Why would she do this? I thought she was my friend. I started rubbing her back and she sobbed a bit and started talking again. I know that Mike has been angry at me lately, and this is only his way of getting back at me for a remark I inadvertently made. But this is overkill, she said. I'm sorry, Eric. This must be worse for you than it is for me. I'm fine, I said. What do you mean Mike is angry at you? Well, Mike had an accident when he was younger and can't have kids. I knew it already when we got married. I'm fine with it. I've always wanted kids, but I wanted Mike just as much. So I became a teacher. Lately, it just hasn't been enough, and I really want to experience motherhood. Eric, I want a family. I want to share all of this love that I have and bring up my own kids instead of teaching everyone else's. So I approached Mike about possibly adopting a baby. He went nuts. His exact words were, "Oh, so I'm not a man since I can't knock you up. Well, I'll show you who's a man. I'll be with that little woman next door and make you watch." It took 3 weeks, but he did it. We didn't say much for a while. As it got dark, the lovebirds came out, and I was really too upset to watch them strolling hand in hand in front of that lake. Besides that, there were just too many big rocks that were the perfect size for throwing. So we left. I went home to an empty house. Melissa went home to Mike. I could hear him screaming at her at first and her screaming back. After a while, the screaming stopped and I saw her sitting at her kitchen table with her papers. The next morning, I went to work as I always did. Myrna handed me a stack of messages from Andy. I dropped them all into the trash basket and told her not to forward any calls from Andy to me. If she called me, just tell her I wasn't accepting calls or messages from her. Then I gave her my iPhone and had her go over to the AT&T store and have my phone number changed. At about 10 o'clock that morning, I got a call from Robert Morgan, Andy's dad. He was going to be in town this morning and wanted to take me to lunch. I met him at the Texas Roadhouse at noon. I hadn't seen him in about 3 weeks, and at his age, this kind of stress couldn't be good for him. "Hi, Eric," he said. "Let's get down to it. We both know why we're here. I warned you about this before you married her. She can stay with us for a few days while you two cool off. But Martha and I want to stay out of this." "Well, when you and Martha put her out, she can stay with her sisters for a while and then her brother," I said. "Hopefully, by that time, we'll have some kind of financial settlement made, so she can find a place of her own," I said quietly. "Eric, what are you talking about?" he asked. "Well, in this state, it'd take about 6 months minimum for a divorce to become final. But our lawyers will work out the settlement long before that," I said. "Just between us, I'd rather come up with a lump sum payment instead of any kind of monthly alimony where I'd have to write her a check every month or whatever. I just want this over with and settled so I can move on with my life." "Eric, I still do not understand you. Andrea said you'd had a difference of opinion and you flipped out on her. So she decided to stay with us for a few days while you calm down. She cried her eyes out last night and won't eat a thing. I know my daughter. When Andrea is right about something or believes that she's right, she's as cold as ice. But last night, she was crying her eyes out. I know she's done something to push you too far, finally. Did she buy another car? You guys didn't have more than $50 a week to live on last time she did that. She couldn't even drive it anywhere because you couldn't afford gas for it. I thought you two were kind of well off financially now, though. Robert, I don't think I should be the person to tell you what Andy did," I said. "It's not my place to talk about someone else's actions." "Darn it," he said. "She really messed you over, didn't she? And the stupid thing about it is that I can see by the way you're on the verge of tears that you still love her. Eric, I warned you once about her. Whatever she did though, try to work it out. She loves you and you clearly love her. You two should be together, but don't back down. Maybe you should consider marriage counseling before you go for a divorce. I've heard you tell her more than once that you'd do anything for her. Isn't she worth just one chance to save your marriage? Andrea has always been strong-minded. I raised her that way," he said. "You know how the two of you like to sit back on that big old deck behind your house and watch the moon? Well, Andrea used to like to climb out of her window onto the roof and watch the moon when she was a little girl. I told her not to do it because she'd fall off the roof and break her neck. She did it anyway, so I spanked her and nailed her window shut. One week, I was out of town on business and Martha was at her ladies' auxiliary meeting. Andrea got the hammer, pulled all of the nails out of the window, and climbed out onto the roof. It had rained the day before, and the tiles were still slippery. Andrea fell off the roof and broke her arm. If the bushes hadn't broken her fall, she was falling headfirst. She probably would have broken her neck. After that, she never went out on the roof again. Andrea can learn, he said. But sometimes she has to learn the hard way by losing something really important to her. Maybe having to be away from you for a little while will solve this. I'm going to ask her what she did, and I'll get back to you. For the next week or so, my life moved in two directions at the same time. I started spending time with Melissa. It just seemed natural. She was really upset with Mike, and I was missing Andy a lot. Melissa started running with me in the evenings. She also started using my gym. I think a lot of it was just her anger and frustration over Mike. We talked a lot about our situations as well. If Mike loved me or treated me nearly as well as you treat Andy, I'd forgive him anything, she said. But in our case, that's the problem. Mike doesn't love me. Maybe he did once, but now I'm just an old shoe to him. I go out to work every day and bring the money in, while he's been unemployed for the last 4 years. When I get in, I have to do the cooking and the cleaning before I get to grade my papers. I'm tired of being taken for granted, and this was just the last straw. I've never told anyone this before, but he's cheated on me before this. Andy knew that I was totally against this from the beginning, I said. This time she just pushed me too far. Eric, we're friends, so 2 things, she told me. Number 1, every time anyone mentions her name, you almost start crying because you love her so much, and being away from her is killing you. Number 2, you've been together for 10 years, and this is the first mistake she's made. For your own sanity, give her another chance. At least talk to her before you give up on her. The easy way out is to just walk away without trying to fix it. I only wish this was Mike's first time messing up so I could forgive him, but this has happened too many times for me. Andy showed up at my office the next day. The security guards had been warned not to let her in the building, so she sat outside the building and cried until someone called the police. The policeman came into the building asking to see me. Sir, your wife is downstairs, and she's not in a good way. We need you to come down and talk to her, to keep her from doing something to herself or someone else, said the first officer. No, I said. Have a nice day. Sir, this conversation isn't over, said the cop. He was obviously getting upset about my flippant attitude and wanted to prove something. How about if we book you on refusal to cooperate and put you in the same cell as your lovely wife? Then you'd have to talk to her, sir, he said. How about if I snap my finger? I said, looking him straight in the eye. What would that do, sir? He asked. When I snap my finger, one of my assistants will call my lawyer. He'll be at the station before we get there. By the time you get me to the building for your bogus investigation, you'll be suspended, and I'll be suing the city for more than you'll make in your entire career. To save us further embarrassment, why don't we take this into my office, so I can explain what's really going on here to you? I told him. When we got inside the office, I asked him if he was married. He told me that he was. I asked him what he'd do if his wife asked him about sleeping with his best friend. He told me there's no way he'd stand for it. That's what she did, I told him. I told her I wouldn't stand for it, but she went ahead and did it anyway. I called her a cab and sent her to her parents while we work our way through the divorce. She can't reach me at home, so now she's harassing me at work. I'm a partner here and we own the building. I have a right to bar entrance to anyone who could cause a scene or disrupt my business. I treated that woman like a queen, and that's how she repaid me. I told him, I don't want to ever see her again. I have never abused her, hit her, or even yelled at her. Don't I have the right to be left alone in my own place of business? Sir, you should file a restraining order, he said. We had no idea of the situation when we arrived. Thank you for explaining it to me. We won't bother you any further. But sir, can I ask you one more thing? I nodded. If you really don't want to have anything to do with her, why are you so sad right now? You look, excuse me, I don't mean to insult you, but you look like you're on the verge of tears. You obviously love her a lot. Why not at least talk to her? He was, of course, right. It was time to talk to her. I went downstairs just as she was getting back into a Ford Fusion, probably Martha's car. I knew Robert drove a Cadillac STS. I tapped on the window, and she jumped out of the car and tried to hug me. I backed away from her. Eric, I miss you so much. Please let me come home. I keep trying to tell you it's over, she said. Andrea, if you want to talk, I'll listen, but it needs to be in private. I don't want to be embarrassed at work by you. Meet me at my house tonight at about 7. I said. Don't you mean our house? She said. I'll just go there now and wait. I'll make us dinner. Andrea, all of the locks have been changed. It's not our house. Maybe after the divorce you'll get it, who knows? I don't want any dinner. I'm just giving you a chance to say what you need to say, and I have a condition. What's the condition? She asked. If you want to have this meeting, you need to tell your parents the truth about what happened between us. None of this misunderstanding nonsense. Have your dad call me at 7 just when you're getting there so he can tell me that he knows what happened. If not, don't come. I won't let you in until I've spoken to him. Eric, can't we keep this between us? She whined. No one else needs to know. If I don't hear from your dad, I don't let you in, and this time I call the police myself, I said. I got some bad news that day at work. The buyer for my nearly completed underground house had been killed in an auto accident. I was pretty sure I could sell the house, so I scheduled the landscapers to go ahead and finish it so I could list it and get it sold. The house was too bizarre to be everyone's cup of tea, but the right buyer would be willing to pay top dollar for it. At 6 o'clock, I went out for my run with Melissa. We had a good run together. I could run faster alone, but I wouldn't have nearly as much fun. So how are things at the house of Mike and Mel? I asked. Frosty as heck, she laughed. He doesn't talk to me, I don't talk to him. But you know what? I'm enjoying it. For the first time since we got married, he isn't ordering me around. I got one of those brochures from the adoption places and I've been going through it. There aren't nearly as many stipulations concerning single-parent adoptions as there used to be. Of course, I have to find a lawyer and get the divorce settled first, but I finally realized that he needs me a lot more than I need him. I got home at 6:45 and had the feeling that I was being watched. I went into the house and showered. At 6:58, the phone rang. I picked it up and answered it. Eric, I'm really sorry, son. I understand why you're upset. I can't believe that a daughter of mine would ever behave that way. I still think that there's a chance for the two of you to work this out, though, if you're willing to forgive her and put it behind you. A few minutes later, I put the phone down and went to the door. Andrea was standing there. Can I come in? She asked. I feel so stupid asking you that. This is my house too. Let's just talk here on the porch, I said. It's a nice night, and it feels good out here. Andy, we're not back together. We're only here to talk, I said. You were the one who wanted to talk to me so badly, so I'll let you go first. You tell me what you have to say. Geeks, you've called me hundreds of times, sent your dad to talk to me, bothered me at work, lied to your parents about why we broke up. And that's all you have to say. I was getting even more upset. What do you want me to say? She asked. Nothing, Andrea, I said, standing up. I'll see you soon. I started going into the house, and she grabbed my arm and started crying. She tried to force me to turn around, but I wouldn't let her pull me around. She came around to the front of me and noticed that I was crying too. Tears were falling from my eyes, rolling down my cheeks, and making tiny little drop marks on the tile of the front porch. What do I have to say to fix this? She shouted. All of a sudden, I lost it. I pushed her away from me harder than I ever had. I was really glad she didn't fall off the porch because I'd have probably gone to jail for assault. How about 2 words, Andrea? I screamed. Number 1, sorry. Have you ever said you're sorry for any of this? Are you sorry because you betrayed our marriage vows? Are you even sorry for what you've done to us? Are you sorry for hurting me? You know, you really ripped my heart out. How about for messing up a marriage that was probably going to last forever? I guess you don't know that word, though. You know what? I can see now how stupid I've been this whole time. And that brings up the second word. Love. You see, ever since we got together, Andrea, it's never been about us loving each other. It's always been about me loving you. I'm supposed to just fall down and worship the great goddess Andrea. Well, forget you, Andrea. Wait a minute. Mike already did. That's why we're here. I went into the house and slammed the door. I left her out there on the porch crying. After about 20 minutes, she rang the doorbell. I looked out the peephole and opened the door a crack. Andrea, I'm done talking to you. Get a lawyer. You're going to need one. I'm sorry, she said. I do love you, and I don't want to lose you. I don't want to live the rest of my life without you. This isn't the way this was supposed to happen. I went back out on the porch to listen to her. Eric, I've always been curious about things. When I was a kid, I once stuck a pin into an electric socket just to see what would happen. Recently, I wanted to see what it would be like to be with someone else. I found out, and it wasn't nearly as good as what we have. In fact, it was nothing compared to our relationship. It was a mistake, but I think you've overreacted. It's not like I cheated on you, and I don't see what I did as a violation of our marriage vows. I was honest with you about my intentions. I even wanted you to be there, but you refused. I thought it would be exciting and fun, but it turned out to be dull. It wasn't enjoyable at all, just fat old Mike doing his thing. I barely even felt anything, and it was over quickly. And now, for that, I have to lose my house, my car, my marriage, my husband, and my happiness? That just doesn't seem fair. Andrea, I told you there'd be consequences. I said. You just didn't listen. You never do. Everything always has to be what you want. We really didn't have much of a marriage to begin with. This was supposed to be something new for us to bring into the bedroom and try out every once in a while, she said. You try out women and bring new tricks home, and so would I. I don't want us to get bored with each other, she said. Andrea, I never wanted anyone except you. Only now you've ruined that, because I don't even want you anymore. I snapped. She looked as if I'd slapped her. After 10 years, I make one mistake, and that's it? Please give me one more chance. I'll do anything you want. We'll go to counseling like my dad suggested. You can do anything you want for revenge or to make yourself feel better. Whatever it takes, I'll do. Promise. This won't ever happen again. Aren't we worth one more shot? You've always said you'd do anything for me. I'm begging you, please just give me a chance. Let me have this one mistake. I swear you won't regret it ever. She looked at me and she knew she had me. You can move back in tomorrow, I told her. But you really need to find a therapist for our counseling sessions. Her smile could have melted a glacier, and she jumped toward me. I backed away and put my hands up. We're not ready for that yet, I said seriously. I'll see you tomorrow. The next evening, as I finished my run, Melissa pointed to the porch. There's your wife, she said. Forgive me if I don't come up to talk to her. I know I'm going to have to eventually, but tonight just isn't the night. See you tomorrow, Mel, I said. Are you sure that's a good idea? She asked. Why wouldn't it be? We're friends now, better friends actually because of our shared experience. I smiled. Well, I just thought that maybe Andy wants to spend more time with you, she said softly. Then she should learn to run, I said. Mel and I have nothing to do with Andy and me. I learned a lot about her through this incident, and I want things to work out between us, but I'm not sure I'll be able to. Some things you can get past, and some things are deal breakers. In this case, I'm the only one who can make that decision, and I don't have a clue. I love her so much that I ached every day that she was away. I don't know if I agreed to this because it was the right thing to do or just to stop the pain. My skin crawls when she gets close to me. I'm just not sure we can make this work. You're not sure you can make what work? Asked Andy. Hello, Melissa, she said coldly. Andy walked closer to me and tried to take my hand. I moved it away from her and said, I'm not sure that we can make us work again. I'm sure enough for both of us so you don't have to be. She smiled. Just watch. Everything will be better than it was before. Promise. Nothing will ever come between us again. What have you been eating? There's nothing in the fridge, she yelled. Wait, there's some salmon in the freezer. Why don't we grill it? Out on the deck. I'll make some rice and veggies to go with it. Tomorrow I'll go shopping while you're at work. We did exactly that. The first night back together was awkward beyond belief. Andy kept talking to fill every lull in the conversation. It was as if she thought that any time we stopped talking, we'd break up again. In my heart, I knew that the easy chemistry we once shared was shattered. I hoped that one day we'd get it back, but I wasn't sure when or how that could ever happen. Andy started to tell me something, but her words were drowned out by a loud crash and a bunch of yelling from next door. "Does that go on often?" asked Andy. "Almost every night," I replied. "When did it start?" she asked. I just looked at her like she was stupid. "Oh," she answered. "I guess I'm responsible for that too. But they've been married for longer than we have. They'll scream for a while to blow off some steam, and then they'll be fine. I'm sure of it. Mel is saving her money for a divorce lawyer. She's the one who's working. She's done with Mike for good. Unless something drastic happens in the next few weeks, they're done," I said. "How do you know that?" asked Andy. "Mel told me," I replied. "For a man who won't touch me and barely seems to be talking with his own wife, you seem to be pretty chummy with Melissa," snapped Andy. "Everyone needs to have someone they can trust," I said. "Someone to talk about their problems to." "That's the point," snapped Andy. "That's supposed to be me. That always was you. Until you became the problem and lost my trust," I said. "Trust is something that has to be earned over time. When we first got together, it took a while before we came to rely on each other. It was easy then because we had no history and had never hurt each other. For over 10 years, we loved each other, trusted each other implicitly, and we had a bond. We had a chemistry based on us almost knowing each other's thoughts. Our hearts beat together, Andy. I didn't care about friends, family, work, or money. Nothing came before you. You came before me. I would have died for you. I had 2 wishes, Andy. Do you know what they were?" "Yes," she said sadly. "All I wanted was to grow old with you and for us to have a baby or 2 together. I don't need to be rich. I don't need to be famous or powerful, Andy. That's all I wanted. And you messed it up with your curiosity. Do you even remember how many nights we've sat out here, just holding each other and watching the moon? We've probably only turned that big TV on a handful of times since we moved in here. Not because there's nothing on, but because we've just never needed it. That's all gone, Andy. I agreed to try this, but I'm truly not sure we can fix this. But it was only sex and only one time. It just seems that you can't even try to get past it. I'm hurting too. I keep feeling like I'm just a broken toy to you right now. You aren't treating me like a human being who feels things and makes mistakes. You're acting like a spoiled little boy who got dirt on his fairy princess doll and doesn't want to play with her anymore because someone else touched it," she said. "Andy, I know that you love sex. I do too. But there's a big difference between going out and sleeping with a hooker and what you and I used to do. It was far more than a physical act. It was special. It was like we brought our souls closer together by sharing our bodies. And now my fairy princess has shared her body with the troll from next door. We're basically no longer exclusive, so there's nothing special about it anymore. It's become cheaper. It's something that, under the right set of circumstances, anyone can have. So who or what will you get curious about next time, Andy? Who or whatever it is, I won't make the mistake of telling you about it," she snapped. "I see what being honest got me. Next time I'll try lying. Andy, right now, we're only held together by the thinnest thread you can imagine. If there ever is a next time, we'd be done so fast you wouldn't even know it. You wouldn't even see me until we met in court. I was so close to dumping you this time that I stopped talking before I said something I'd regret. Even in the dark, I could see Andy crying. I realized that I'd let my anger push me into saying things that I shouldn't have. Good night, Andy, I said. I'm sorry for the things I said. I shouldn't have said them. I guess I'm still angry about this whole thing. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. Maybe we should have gone to counseling before we moved back in together. I'm glad you let me move back. I couldn't take sleeping alone another night, she said. I'd have gone crazy if I had to spend another day without seeing you. Why do you think I came up to your job yesterday? I know it's going to take a lot of work to get you back, Eric, but I'm going to do it. I swear that things with us are going to be even better, she said. Now let's go to bed. She followed me upstairs, and when I got to the master bedroom, she came in and sat down on the bed. She pulled her shirt over her head and started taking off her clothes. Andy, what are you doing? I asked. Getting undressed so we can go to bed, silly. She smiled. Andy, we won't be sleeping together or doing anything else for a while, I said. There are plenty of bedrooms in the house. Pick one. Andy tried her best to hide her tears. You aren't even trying, she said. Maybe you don't love me anymore. The next morning, I was up, showered, and almost gone before Andy got out of bed. I was backing out of the driveway when Andy came running out of the house, still in only her bra and panties. She tapped on my window and I let it down. I left you a key on the island in the kitchen, I said. I hadn't gotten around to canceling your credit cards, so they still work. I rolled the window back up only to have her tap on it again. You were going to leave without telling me goodbye? She asked. I noticed that you don't want to kiss me or touch me, but you need to say goodbye to me just to be polite. Andy, you were asleep, I said. I didn't want to wake you. I didn't sleep very well anyway, and you can wake me any time you want, even if it's just to tell me goodbye or good night or good morning. Even better if you wanted to kiss me, or hug me, or feel me up or sleep with me, she said. No matter what I've done, I'm still yours, and I always will be. I know I messed up, but I am trying to fix it. When I got to work, Myrna asked me, Are you back with Andy? Kind of on a trial basis, I said. Good. Maybe you can get your head out of your rear now, she said. She left you a stack of messages that all say the same thing. She loves you. You must have been really good to her last night. Why not give her your new phone number so she can call you herself and save me any future embarrassment? When I got home that night, I was feeling better. I said hi to Andy when I came in and started changing for my run. Is it okay if I invite a couple of guests for dinner? She asked. Andy, it's your house too. You don't have to ask me things like that. You never did before. Actually, I was kind of glad that we wouldn't be having another awkward night alone. I met Mel coming out of her house. We ran our usual slow 4-mile loop and talked all the way. I couldn't help noticing that Mel had dropped a lot of weight, especially around her tummy, and she was looking really good. I bought a new swimsuit today, she said. It's still a one-piece, but Mike's eyes practically popped out when he saw me in it. He came over and reached for me until I told him that if he touched me, I'd cut off his dignity. How are things with you two? She asked. Weird, I answered. Our chemistry is just gone. It's like I'm starting all over with a new person. And I get so angry at her sometimes. It'll pass, said Mel. The first time Mike cheated on me, it took over 6 months for me to even sleep in the same room with him. Another month before we were together again, and even then, it just wasn't the same. Give it some time. When we got done, I said goodbye to Mel and started to go into the house. Andy opened the door for me and then went to talk to Mel. When I got out of the shower, I went downstairs to see what Andy had made for dinner. Smelled great. I went out onto the deck and immediately got angry. Mike was sitting nervously in one of my lounge chairs. I told you not to ever set foot in my house again, I snapped. Get out. Now. Eric, baby. I asked Mike and Melissa to come over tonight for dinner and to swim, said Andy. Please sit down. I've got some things I need to say. Melissa stood up and came over to the lounge chairs near us, and I was shocked. A month of running and not eating much had done wonders for her figure. I had trouble taking my eyes off her. Her already large chest was showcased in the swimsuit. It nipped in to show off her now slimmer waist and flared back out. The suit was cut very high on the back, and her cheeks were barely covered by the thin strip of material. The sight of Melissa in that suit was nearly pornographic. This time there was no hiding my reaction. I hoped that Andy and Mike hadn't noticed, but Mel grinned a bit. Until recently, the four of us were the best of friends, began Andy. Mike and I did something that, while it was cheap and stupid, and not even good, messed that friendship up. With the four of us, there were 7 relationships. Us as a whole, the guys, Mel and I, Mike and I, Mel and Eric, and the 2 marriages. Of those 7 relationships, 6 of them have been either ruined or damaged severely. I don't think things will ever be the same among us. We may never be friends again. Maybe that's too much to hope for. But I do have a suggestion that might go a long way towards at least saving the 2 marriages. I don't think that's possible, Andrea, said Melissa. I feel like Eric doesn't love me anymore, and that's killing me, said Andy. I'd give anything just to have him hold me again. He hates Mike so bad I can feel the heat from him right now. And Mel, you aren't ready to even consider forgiving Mike. Eric hates Mike because Mike had sex with me. It makes him think of me as damaged goods, and he doesn't want me anymore. You hate me too, Melissa, and you hate Mike for having sex with me. The reason this is so bad is because there's no balance. To balance this out, I think that Eric and Melissa should have sex. No one said a word. You could hear crickets chirping in the background. How would that help anything? Asked Mike. They're practically dating already, he snapped. She's been coming over to your house every day to go out and run or swim with him or work out with him. They even eat dinner together a lot. Not that I'm complaining, because all the workouts have her looking better than she's ever looked. I'm ashamed to admit this, but I've cheated on Mel way more times than I should have. And Andy, all that stuff I told you was nonsense. I just wanted to sleep with you. But I'm human, and I have urges, and I act on them. How do we know that those 2 haven't already been together and just didn't tell us? I catch her all the time staring out our kitchen window at him while she's grading her papers. Melissa and I have never done that, I said. Neither of us is a cheater. And I hate to admit this, but I agree with Mike. I don't see how 2 wrongs are supposed to make a right. If Mike stole your baseball and got it dirty, wouldn't it be fair for you to get to use his and get it dirty as well? Then you'd be even, and you could be friends again, said Andy. It's simplistic, but the logic fits. Let's just eat, and we'll talk about it more later, said Andy. We ate, and though we had dinner together many times before, it was different this time. Even more different than you'd expect it to be. I hate Mike and would never imagine myself speaking to him again, let alone being friends. Mike didn't hate me, but he felt uncomfortable around me because he didn't know if I was going to jump up and kick his rear at any moment or decide that I wanted to sleep with his wife, who he was suddenly interested in. Melissa was angry at Mike and planning on divorcing him and adopting a child. I still didn't know how I felt about Andy, but I was having trouble looking away from Melissa. Melissa felt sorry for Andy, but she kept looking at me. Andy was angry at Mike for lying to her and using her. Andy was jealous of Melissa because Mel and I were actually the only 2 at the table who were speaking to each other, and for once she had the idea that someone could take away something that she wanted, namely me. After dinner, Andy cleared the table. Mike sat alone on the deck and watched as Mel and I spoke to each other out of hearing range. Mel and I decided to play with Mike and Andy's minds for a while. Melissa and I have decided to think about it, I announced. We really have become friends through all of this and are going to spend a little more time together. Maybe we'll do it. Maybe we won't. Maybe we'll do it and not tell you. Maybe we won't do it and we'll tell you we did just to mess with you. Oh, hell no, said Mike. I don't like that either, sniffed Andy. To quote what someone told me not too long ago, these are our bodies, and we can do what we want with them, said Mike. I don't like that either, sniffed Andy. To quote what someone told me not too long ago, these are our bodies, and we can do what we want with them, I said. Tomorrow night, Mel and I are going out together. Maybe when we get back it will have happened. Maybe it won't. Why can't you just take her upstairs and do it now? Said Mike. Let's just get this over with. I really don't like this, said Andy. This isn't fair. Why not? I asked. You got to do it your way and then bragged about it afterward. You couldn't wait to tell me how you'd done it and it wasn't any good and it didn't mean anything. Then you expected me to just let it go and say, oh, Andy, you were right. Everything is just fine. But everything isn't fine, is it, Andy? And everything may never be fine again. So Mel and I are going to do this the way we want, just like you did. Only this time, it will be the cheaters who are sitting home hurting, I said. But there's a difference here, said Andy. With me and Mike it was just sex. Mike thinks that I'm a spoiled witch and he wouldn't put up with my nonsense in a million years. He just wanted to sleep with me because I have a nice body. I think Mike is a disgusting slob, and I'm not attracted to him at all. I just wanted to sleep with someone other than Eric for one goddamn time. Melissa, deny it if you want to, but you like my husband. I'm not just talking about sex here. You're attracted to Eric, and he hasn't been able to look away from your chest, your rear, or your face all night. There is a real danger here of you two liking this too much, so I agree with Mike. You two should just get it over with or forget the whole idea. I've been through too much trouble trying to get my husband back to just give him away to you. Melissa and I looked at each other and moved in closer. Then we wrapped our arms around each other as Andy looked on in horror, tears appearing in the corners of her eyes. I have to admit, she felt really good. Amazing, in fact. Then we brought our faces close together, pushed away from each other, and shook hands. See you tomorrow, Mel, I said. Don't forget we're shooting for 5 miles. I grabbed a beer off the table and headed upstairs. Well, I've got papers to grade, said Mel as she headed next door. Mike and Andy just stood there with their mouths open. A little while later, Andy knocked on the door of my room. Can we talk? She asked. I guess, I answered. She came into the room wearing a long robe that covered everything. That was a first. She'd obviously been crying again. I'm going to get you an escort, she said. What the hell are you talking about now, Andy? I asked. Well, it's only right that you get to sleep with someone else to make up for what I did. But I don't want it to be Melissa, she said. I still have no clue what you're talking about, Andy. There's something going on between you and Melissa. You may not see it, she may not see it, but trust me, it's there, and it scares the hell out of me. Eric, all my life I've been the pretty girl. I always knew I could have any guy I wanted. I never had to worry about losing a boyfriend to anyone else, even though I didn't put out. This is hard for me to admit, but until tonight, I never took Melissa seriously. I mean, she's always been kind of borderline pretty, but she's shorter and chunkier than I am. She has a big chest, but I have everything else, and her gut was kind of a turnoff. But now my marriage is crumbling, and stress and worrying about what I may have lost has been hard on me. I'm not looking my best, and Melissa has somehow lost that gut and toned up crazily. Even I had to admit tonight she looked really good in that swimsuit. And you noticed it too. Mike is really pissed and he doesn't want you anywhere near her. You two spend way too much time together. I'm really afraid that with your anger towards me and your so-called friendship with her, that I could lose you, she said. I realize now that I've been kind of selfish during our marriage and took you for granted. But that's over now. It won't happen again, I promise. I know that I don't have the right to ask for any favors, but I'm begging you for this one. If you have to have your revenge sex, I'll get you anyone you want. A model, an athlete, a hooker, a porn star, Britney Spears, or a goddamn circus clown. I'll even try and hook you up with my sister if you want. Anybody except Melissa, she said. I started laughing, and the sheet pulled down a bit, revealing my chest and the upper region of my stomach. Andy looked, and I heard her sigh quietly. I suddenly wondered what she was doing for sex. It had been over a month since the incident, and Andy needed sex daily, at least. I'm serious, Eric, she said. I know you better than anyone in the world, and before tonight, I've never seen you look at anyone except me that way. And when Melissa hugged you in your little handshake parody, her eyes almost rolled back in her head when you guys made contact. When you stopped hugging her, I thought her chest was going to shred that suit. But that's not the real problem, is it? What is the real problem, Andy? I snapped. Are you afraid of not being in control of the situation? You get to go off and pick the biggest scumbag we know, who also used to be my best friend, and sleep with him on my deck in broad daylight. But you want to choose who I have sex with to make sure it isn't someone who threatens you. Is that the problem? No, Eric, she said. That's not the problem. The problem is that, to me, there's a difference between love and sex. I could go out tonight and have sex with 3 guys, and you'd still be the only man that I love. I can separate the two. You can't. If you have sex with Melissa, I'll lose you for good. I'm sure of it. Eventually, I'll run out of curiosity, and you and I will settle down, and things will be wonderful again. And we'll have all the things that we want. But if you and Melissa have sex, things won't ever be the same. Eric, I know I shouldn't ask you this, but can I sleep with you tonight? I know you still think I'm damaged, so I know you don't want to have sex with me, but it's been so long since I had a good night's sleep and felt safe and warm. Okay, Andy, I heard myself say. She dropped the robe and was naked under it. Then she climbed into bed next to me. Over the next few minutes, she slowly moved closer to me until we were almost touching. I felt one of her feet tentatively touch mine and then start inching its way across my legs. Andy, just stop wiggling around and get comfortable, I snapped. Are you sure you want me to be comfortable? She asked quietly. I said so, didn't I? Came out far harsher than I'd intended, but somehow the tone didn't seem to matter. Okay, said Andy. I could hear the happiness in her voice. The next thing I knew, she'd swung one of those long legs over mine, and her left arm was wrapped around me. Her left chest was resting on my upper abdomen, and its softness was tickling the hair on my stomach. The biggest problem was that this position had her left leg in contact with my crotch, and her warmth was in contact with my left leg. I could feel the heat coming from it, and I'm sure Andy could feel me swelling. This is so much better, Andy cooed. I've missed this for so long. This is the way I'm supposed to sleep. Are you sure there's nothing you want to say or do before we drift off? I was thinking a lot of things right then. Rolling over and taking back what was mine was chief among them. I started to say something, and my arm rubbed against her chest. Oh, exclaimed Andy. Sorry, that was an accident, I snapped. Don't be sorry, said Andy. I didn't mind at all. That was the problem, I realized. I don't think she minded who she was with as long as she got what she wanted. Even though I didn't see her with Mike, my mind was flooded with images of Andy with Mike in all different positions. All of a sudden, I felt uncomfortable being close to her. I rolled over in the opposite direction with my back to her and no contact. Sorry, I'm not comfortable sleeping on my back, I snapped. Good night, Andrea. As I drifted off to sleep, I heard her quietly sobbing. I felt bad about the way things were between us. I also felt guilty because she was clearly trying hard to fix things in our relationship, and I had adopted a very casual attitude about it. I guess my mind said let's just wait and see. If it works, it does. If not, we tried. Early the next morning, I dreamed that Melissa was giving me a favor. It shocked me because, until that point, I'd actually never had a sexual thought about Melissa. Seeing her in that swimsuit the previous night had definitely put her on my radar, though. In the dream, Mel stopped and mounted me. She slowly lowered her warmth over me until we were touching. Then she started to move in small, short strokes. God, that woman was good. She knew exactly what I liked, as if we'd been together for years. I reached up to feel those big assets that had enthralled me at the pool last night and couldn't find them. All I felt was a small, firm asset with a hard peak. In a second, I realized what was going on and grabbed Andy by her shoulders and pulled her off of me. What the hell is wrong with you, Andy? I screamed at her. I'm sorry. I just wanted you so badly, she cried. And you liked it and you needed it too. I was asleep, Andy. I didn't know what was going on. My mind keeps going back to a time before all of this happened. Back when there was only us. Back before you messed things up. We were so happy then. And in the dream I was having, it was like old times when we couldn't get enough of each other. I was lying through my teeth, but telling her that I was dreaming about Melissa would have only made things worse. The surprising thing was that I had never lied to Andy before then, and I guess I should have felt guilty about it. But I really didn't. That didn't bode well for the relationship. So why can't we just pretend that it's still like that? She cried. Or pretend that we're past all of my curiosity and the damage it did to us. That way, we could undo all of this nonsense and get back to just us. Andy, I'm not that good at pretending, I said. You want me to pretend that you didn't sleep with Mike? Pretend that we hadn't talked about it beforehand? Pretend that you didn't just ruin 10 years of friendship, trust, and love because you were curious about what another experience would feel like? Okay, Andrea, since you're so good at games, hold out your hands and close your eyes. Andy held her hands up in front of her. Remember the way we used to feel about each other. Run that through your mind. Remember the closeness. Imagine the fact that I loved you so much I couldn't stand to be away from you. I would have done anything for you. I'd have chewed my arm off to get to you. Being with you was the greatest thing in the world. Every inch of your body was a treasure to me. Andy, I always had the feeling that if you ever died, even if it wasn't from sickness or disease or old age, even if it was something stupid like a car accident, that I'd die soon after. I'd have to because I was simply not capable of living without you. Can you feel that, Andrea? I smirked. Put all of those feelings in one hand. Even in the dark, I could see Andy smiling. Now for the other hand, I began. Have you noticed the distance between us now? Have you noticed that I still have trouble being in the same room with you for more than a few minutes? I really tried last night, but sometimes you still make my skin crawl when you touch me. Do you understand that, Andy? When I come home now, I don't run through the house trying to find you because I can't bear to be away from you anymore. Sometimes I find myself praying that you're out visiting someone, but then I wonder who you're visiting and whether or not you're with them. Every time you brush up against me, even by accident, I need to take about 100 showers before I feel clean. At this point, if you were in an accident, I don't know whether I'd even feel sad, let alone die. In some ways, I know that you're trying to save our marriage, Andrea, but I can't help feeling that maybe it would be better if we just let it die. If we go our separate ways, it'll hurt me for a while, but I was almost over it. I'm not sure that it would even hurt you because you were so eager to risk throwing it away so you could be with Mike. I don't trust you anymore, and I'm not sure that I ever will again. Melissa says it'll take time, but I don't think we can ever get back what we had, and I wonder if I wouldn't be better off looking for something like that with someone else than settling for a pale imitation of it with you. In short, we're like a broken glass, Andrea. All of the water is flowing out of the hole. Only it's not water flowing out. It's my love for you. Unless we find some way to plug the leak, it's all going to be gone. Andy's smile had now faded, and she was crying again. Compare those two sets of feelings, Andy, I snapped. Which one do you like better? The first one, she said quietly. That's what I want back so badly. I'd do anything to have that back. And despite what you think, we're going to get it. It may take a little time and a lot of work, but I promise you, when this is all done, we'll be back there. And we'll be stronger. Something in what she just said set my alarm bells off, but I didn't pay them any attention. So, Andrea, think about that second hand. The way things are now feels like, I said. I don't want to, she said. I don't like it. I hate it. But you need to really run it through your mind, Andy. It's really important for us for you to know that, I said seriously. But why? It's ugly, and I don't feel like you love me anymore, she snapped. Because, Andy, it's what you wanted to find out from the start, I said. That's what another experience feels like. Now you know. I went into the shower and got ready to go to work, leaving Andy in the bed sobbing. I hated to be so hard on her, but none of this seemed to be getting through to her. Several of the things she'd said had filled me with dread and uncertainty. She'd said, when all of this is over. And in another conversation, she'd said, when my curiosity is all done. She'd also told me, next time I won't be this honest. I won't tell you. Over the next few weeks, things slowly improved between me and Andy. We got back to the point where I was able to stay in the same room with her, and we even spent time sitting next to each other on the deck after dinner. Mel joined us sometimes, which always made Andy jealous, but I could tell she was trying not to say anything. She hated the fact that Mel and I still spend a lot of time together. Have you been with her yet? Andy asked me one night out of the blue. She was really angry because she'd seen me hug Mel after one of our runs. We'd just done our first 10-miler and were just two friends congratulating each other for a big accomplishment. But Andy's jealousy got out of hand. If I had, you probably wouldn't still be here, I replied. Andy burst into tears and ran away. Later she came out on the deck. I'm sorry, she said. It just hurts sometimes. I've been back in our house for almost 3 months, and things are better between us. I can feel that, but you still won't even touch me, let alone be with me. But then I see you hugging her. And I know that to you it's just a buddy hug. But if you saw the way the two of you looked into each other's eyes and embraced, you'd understand why I want to strangle that woman. Now you know why Mike and I will never be friends again, I said. The difference is that I only hugged Mel. In public, with all our clothes on. You let Mike sleep with you. Yes, I did, she snapped. I let Mike sleep with me. So now I'm damaged goods forever. And the only man I love, the one who promised to love me forever, won't even touch me. Do you know why I hate Melissa so much now? It's not just the fact that you guys are friends. It's because I would literally die to have you hug me the way you just hugged her. The two of you are so easy together, so confident and comfortable around each other. Mike and I aren't like that. And as you never stop bringing up, he slept with me. He and I had sex, and it hasn't made us nearly as close as you and Melissa are. But in your mind, love and sex are connected. Where's the connection between Mike and me? We hate each other now because we slept together, and it's cost us our happiness. Eric, if I let someone drive your precious Mustang, you would be pissed. Let's say it was one of our neighbors who really wanted to see what driving it was like, so I let him drive it around the block one time, less than a mile, so your odometer doesn't even change. He doesn't damage the car, and you wouldn't have even known except for the fact that you came home and saw him pulling into the driveway. How would you react to that? I know you'd be pissed at me, of course. But let's not talk about your feelings toward me. Let's talk about how you'd feel about your precious car. She could see me getting angry just at the thought of it because we both knew that I'd probably kill him, cut the body up into small pieces, and bury them all over the country. No one touched my Mustang. You'd probably wash the car 2 or 3 times, inside and out. Recondition the leather with some of your Armor all-leather cleaner. Even though he's only sat in the driver's seat, you'd do all the seats in the interior. You'd do the driver's seat twice, maybe 3 times. You'd do the steering wheel and everything else he touched at least 3 times. You'd be angry as hell. It would probably take a couple of days, maybe even a week, but I doubt that. But then you'd drive that car again, wouldn't you? You couldn't help it. You love that car. So even if someone else despoiled your precious car, you'd drive it again. You wouldn't have keys to it ever again, and if I didn't drive it, I'd reprogram the garage door so no one could even get near it, but I guess I would drive it again. I admit it. So why won't you drive me? She snapped. Mike slept with me for 5 goddamn minutes one time. I keep telling you there was nothing special about it. I didn't even like it. I was only curious. I've taken hundreds of showers since then, but you still haven't even kissed me, and it's been 3 months. Not even a peck. You told me a few weeks ago that being with me was the greatest thing you could think of. If you'd go back to driving the car again, why can't we go back to being together? A hug like the one you just gave Melissa would at least give me some hope, Eric. I should have figured that's what all of this is about, I said slowly. How about tonight? I said, smiling as I pulled out my iPhone. You're going to hug me tonight? She asked hopefully. I thought you wanted to be driven. I smiled. I thought you wanted to be with me. I do, she said, so excited she was bouncing up and down. It's for you, I said, handing her my phone. When she heard Mike's voice over the phone, her whole face turned red, and she flung it as hard as she could. That's how I lost that iPhone. The end of the summer was coming up, and Andy and I decided to throw a party. Just a few friends and neighbors and some family members. Melissa was invited, which made Andy really pissed, but Mike wasn't, which made me really happy. Her parents, siblings, and their spouses were coming. We were very busy planning it and buying food and supplies for the party when it happened. Mel and I had just come back from a run. I was watching her as she went into the house to shower when I noticed Mike jump over the fence into my yard. Andy had told me that she would be out for a while doing some shopping for the party, so I knew she wasn't home. What the hell was that moron doing, going into my yard when neither Andy nor I was home? I followed him, and I swear to God I thought that he was trying to steal something from me or borrow one of my tools without asking because he knew that I'd never loan him anything ever again. Mike didn't stop in my yard. He hopped the fence into George and Sandy Cooper's yard. I waited for a few minutes and followed him. He walked right into their house without knocking. I pulled out my new iPhone 4. I got it to replace the iPhone 3GS that Andy had thrown. I crept up to the window. I was sure that Mike was sleeping with Sandy Cooper now, and the video would help Mel get rid of her cheating husband for good. Sandy Cooper wasn't home, but George was, and he and 2 other guys were with Andy at the same time. Last time you wanted to try double penetration, said George. This time you're getting 3 at a time. That should take care of your curiosity. 3 or 4. I'm next, said Mike. No, Mike. I already slept with you once. You weren't any good, and you messed up my marriage, said Andy. I almost lost Eric because of you. Andy, I just wanted to see if I could make you scream the way that he does. I almost lost Melissa too. She hasn't been with me since then. At least you get to be with someone, said Mike. It isn't the same, snapped Andy. I just wanted to try the group thing out of curiosity. I really don't feel anything, except for a lot of rubbing and thrusting. These guys can't make it work either. No matter how hard they pound me with their tools, it isn't doing anything. There must be something to Eric's theory about love and being together. But Andy, if you don't let me be with you, I'll tell Eric you did this, and at least then he might forgive me and talk to Mel for me. I only slept with you once. This is George's 3rd time, and the 2nd time you've done more than one guy, said Mike. This is never going to happen again. My curiosity is all settled, said Andy. After tonight, no one but Eric will ever touch me. So if that's what it takes to shut you up, I'll let you do it for 5 more minutes. Unlike these guys, you won't even need a condom since you only shoot blanks. I didn't stay long enough to see Mike get his turn. God damn it. I thought I was all cried out over Andy, but I wasn't. I ran into the house and started packing everything that I needed. I was loading my suitcase into the Mustang when Melissa came out of her house. Eric, what's wrong? She asked. I gave her the phone and hit the play button. Eric, I'm so sorry, she said. She was crying too, and I could tell she meant it. Where are you taking her this time? Back to her parents' house. No, Mel. I'm leaving this time. There's no way back from this one. I just need to get away while I start hiding my assets to limit my exposure in the divorce. Believe it or not, I'll probably miss you more than I'll miss that cheating 304, I said. No, you won't. Don't say things that aren't true, she said. Wait a minute. I need to get something. Mel ran into her house and came back with a suitcase. She threw it in the trunk next to mine and said, Let's go. I looked at her in shock. I told you a long time ago I was getting rid of Mike. This is as good a time as any, she said. Unless you don't want me to come with you. I hadn't given any thought to where I'd go. So we drove around for a while and ended up eating at the lake as it started to get dark. And we still hadn't made any plans. I told Mel that we'd have to check into a motel. I saw the first of those awful romantic couples come strolling along the waterfront. I was so enraged that I grabbed my supersized soda and heaved it at them. It would have hit them too if Mel hadn't grabbed my arm and made the throw go off target. As soon as we got back in the car, my phone started ringing. I saw that it was Andy and let it go to voicemail. We drove to the nearest hotel we could find. Turned out to be the Summit Inn. A little pricey, but at least we wouldn't have to worry about anything weird. I'd seen enough of that on my phone tonight to last me a lifetime. Which really was funny because I'd always thought I was going to spend my lifetime with the person on my phone. Mel and I stepped up to the desk and put our suitcases down. A few seconds later, a gangly old man got behind the desk. Gee, mister, your wife sure is pretty, he said. I looked at him strangely and said, My wife is a cheating blonde. She's the ugliest person I can think of because of it. Her hair isn't blonde, he said, puzzled. Suddenly, I realized he was talking about Mel. I smiled and said, Yeah, you're right. She really is pretty. She's the most beautiful woman I know. We need 2 rooms, I said. 1, said Melissa. Neither of us should be alone tonight. Oh boy, we're in trouble, I said. 1, repeated Melissa. Neither of us should be alone tonight. Oh boy, we're in trouble, I said as we stepped into the room. There's only 1 bed. Melissa started laughing. Eric, whether you know it or not, you're my best friend. I trust you totally. We'll be fine whatever happens. But we need to have a talk. I didn't know whether to run out of the room or not. Whenever a woman says, we need to have a talk, it's always serious. Before we got started with our talk, Melissa's phone rang. I'm curious about what that jerk has to say, she said. To tell you the truth, I didn't think he'd even notice that I was gone. "Oh boy," she said suddenly. "What?" I asked. "Wrong jerk," she replied. She put the phone on speaker and held her finger up to her lips, meaning for me to listen but not to say anything. I nodded my head. "Hello, Andrea," said Melissa. "Melissa, I hate to bother you, but can you come over here? I really need someone to talk to right now," said Andy. "Andrea, I'm not at home right now. I'm back at work, so I can't come over. Can it wait until tomorrow?" said Melissa, smiling. "Besides, you and I are not exactly friends. So are you sure I'm the person you should be talking to? Mel, I'm really sorry for what I did to you with Mike. I'd do anything to make it up to you. I'll give you anything you want, just name it. You are the person I need to talk to more than anyone else," said Andy. "Why is that?" Melissa asked. "Because you know more than I do right now about what Eric is thinking or where he might be going." "Melissa, Eric just ran off. I don't know where he is or when he'll be back. Last time we fought and he threw me out, there was a reason for it. As you know, I had done something awful. But this time, I don't have a clue why he'd just leave me," whined Andy. Melissa and I were trying our best not to laugh. "We've been slowly getting closer again," Andy said sadly. "It's been really hard for me, but I'm trying my best because I love him so much. We're even planning a party together for the day after tomorrow. I went out to do some shopping while you guys had your run. I spoke to Mike and he said you and Eric went running as usual. Mike is really jealous of that, you know. Anyway, he said he heard you coming back into the house. So he knew you guys came home. I guess that's when you went back to work. Where did Eric go?" she whined. "Andrea, it's only 9:30. Maybe he just went out for a drive. When you and my a-hole of a husband were planning your little fest, Eric went out and drove his car every night. Remember? That always seems so stupid to me," said Mel. "Why? He likes to drive that car. I used to think that after me, that car was his favorite thing on this earth. Right now, I'm pretty sure that car is ahead of me," said Andy. "I wasn't saying it was stupid for him to go out and drive the car, Andy. I was saying that you were stupid," said Mel. "Eric is a really great guy. He loves you so much. Do you know how lucky you are? Most women would die to have someone treat them like he treats you. When we used to be friends, you told me all the time about how great you were together. Why would you risk that to screw around with my lazy husband? That's what's stupid," said Mel. "Lately, I've been wishing I was you," said Andy. "I've been wishing I was you," she repeated. "I got really jealous a few weeks ago after listening to him talking about how great you are. I saw him hug you, and I just wanted to kill you, Melissa. I'll never let anyone come between us. Anyway, I did something really stupid, and I regret it, but I'll have to handle that later. I hope you're right. His car is gone, so maybe he did just go for a drive. If you hear from him, please let me know." "Told you," said Melissa, hanging up the phone. "That a-hole doesn't even know or care that I'm gone. At least Andrea is worried sick about you. My own husband doesn't give a flying idea about where I am or even if I'm coming home." I hugged Melissa to comfort her. After a few minutes, she was okay. "Why don't you go ahead and take your shower while I make a few phone calls?" she said. I figured that she wanted to be alone for a while, so I headed for the shower. I came out wearing long boxers and a t-shirt. Somehow, I didn't feel weird about being around Melissa in my underwear. It was probably because the boxers and shirt were very similar to what we both wore when we ran together every day. "Eric, turn the lights out," yelled Melissa. I did, and then she came out of the bathroom and got into bed. "I thought we were going to have a talk," I reminded her. "We may as well talk tomorrow," she said. "I don't want to harm your virtue." "How would talking harm my virtue? We talk all the time. You're the person I'm the most comfortable talking to," I said. "If we turn the lights back on, I don't think we'll get much talking done, because I'm kind of naked," said Melissa. "And even though our spouses gave us permission to do it, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. But I did figure out what I want from Andrea to make all of my hurts go away." Before I could even ask what it was, Melissa told me she'd never tell me. It was as if she'd read my mind. That was the way Andy and I used to be. I missed it. Sometime during the night, the inevitable rolling occurred. For some reason, human beings in a bed exhibit a lot of the same principles as magnets. I think that, with the exception of gay or lesbian individuals, all men are positively charged, and all women are negatively charged. If you put two men or two women in a bed together, they end up rolling as far away from each other as they can and staying there. The similar charges repel. But if you put a man and a woman in bed together, they seem to always end up together. It was still dark when I realized that Melissa was in front of me. A microsecond later, I realized that my tool was in the crack of her bum. Melissa had lost a lot of weight over the last 4 months, but she still had a lot more bum than Andy would ever have. Andy had that tight little bikini bum that most men claim to like. Andy's bum was also hard as a rock. Melissa's, on the other hand, was soft and pliable, and my tool was getting harder by the second and pushing its way further into it. I couldn't risk any sudden moves because I didn't want her to think I was trying something. Another microsecond went by before I realized that my tool wasn't the only thing wandering. My arm was lying across Mel's shoulder, and my hand was on one of those large, soft jugs. I don't think I'd ever felt anything so soft and warm in my entire life. That realization only served to enlarge my tool more. Then I realized that Melissa's hand was on top of mine, pressing it onto her jug. It wasn't my tool pressing into Mel's bum. She was pushing it against me. "Sorry," she said, moving her hand off of mine. "I couldn't help it. I've wanted you for so long. But I didn't want it to be like this." "Like what?" I asked. "I didn't want you to just screw me as some kind of revenge reaction to get back at Mike and Andy. I didn't want to take advantage of you because you're vulnerable or because you're devastated over finding out that the woman you love is a sociopathic round-heeled 304 who'd probably screw a snake to satisfy her curiosity. Especially when the thing she's looking for, she had from the beginning," she said. "Melissa, shut the hell up," I snapped. "You're totally wrong. I know it's still hard for you to hear bad things about Andy, Eric, but she's not good for you anymore," said Melissa. "No, you said the woman I love is a sociopathic round-heeled 304 who'd probably screw a snake to satisfy her curiosity. I'm not about to let you talk about yourself that way," I said. I started to move my hand from her jug, since her hand was no longer holding it in place. "Who told you to move your hand?" She smiled. "I had it right where I wanted it." I pulled her to me and started rubbing her sides. "Oh yeah, take it easy on me. It's been a long time," she said. I started nibbling her back and shoulders, and she loved it. I worked my way down and started licking her soft round bum. While doing this, I noticed that the months of running had taken their toll, and there was no longer any flab around her abdominal region. My questing fingers continued their walk up her torso and avoided her jugs. "Hey, aren't you going to rub my—" she began. "Forget about what I was going to say," she hissed. "Just keep doing what you're doing." Mel's legs had ceased flopping around on me and were currently around my neck, nearly choking the life out of me. "Eric, don't stop," she cried. "That's so good." I took note of the fact that Mel was rubbing and squeezing her own jugs. Unlike Andrea, she seemed to need more attention given to them. I filed that away for next time. While I was thinking about that, I reached around her with one of my arms and started to squeeze her jugs and rub her engorged dugs. I took tiny bites on her neck while we started screwing with long, slow, easy strokes. We took our time. I don't think either of us was even remotely interested in anything like what we'd seen on my phone. This wasn't about getting off. It was about getting in and meeting inside each other's hearts and heads, while our bodies did what bodies do. "Do you like it?" she asked quietly. I replied. We kept it up for a long time, and it was really special. Not just because I hadn't done anything that didn't require my hand in months, but because this was the beginning of something extraordinary. A little while longer, I started to pull out and warn Melissa, but she wrapped her arm behind me and pushed me back in. "Don't stop, Eric. I want it inside me," she said. I thought that meant that she was on the pill or safe, and really I wanted it too. I wanted to just coat her insides with my baby batter and make this woman mine. At that moment, I didn't care about Mike, or Andrea, or anyone else except for Mel and me. I just let go and fired line after line of sperm into her unprotected walls. After that, Melissa just rolled over and smiled at me. She started kissing me gently and thanked me. "What are you thanking me for?" I asked. "I'm the one who should be thanking you." "No, Eric. I have never done anything like that. Ever," she said emphatically. I woke up to Mel saying, "Eric, I have to pee." I noticed that, unlike when I slept with Andy, this time I was the one who was wrapped around Mel, one arm over her chest and one leg over hers. "Are you trying to lay claim on me or just making sure I don't try to escape?" she asked. "Definitely the first one," I said. "Well, you need to know that I'm temporarily a married woman," she laughed. "But I intend to take care of that immediately, then I'll be accepting offers. I'd offer you my heart and a place in my life forever from this moment forward," I said seriously. "I'll take it," she smiled. "I'm off the market." She went into the bathroom and peed. Then I heard the shower start, and I jumped out of bed and ran in. I opened the door, got in behind her, and started rubbing my hands slowly down her sides. "Eric, what about Andy?" she asked. "Andy who?" I replied. "Are you going to be doing a lot of nasty things to me today?" she asked. "Nope," I said. "Oh," she replied, seeming kind of disappointed. "I'm going to be doing nasty things to you every day," I said. We spent the morning calling into work and taking some vacation time. We called my lawyer and set up an appointment to see him. Then we spent the rest of the day in bed doing those aforementioned nasty things. Sometime that afternoon, I was going to call room service and remembered my phone. My voicemail was full, and I had over 50 texts from Andy. Melissa had a couple of calls from Mike and at least 10 from Andy. We couldn't stay at the hotel for too long, but during the day, I'd had an idea. Mel and I could move into the underground house. I got the power and utilities turned on, and we spent the rest of the day shopping for things we'd need and moved in that evening. "Which bedroom are you taking?" asked Mel. "I'd hope to be in the one with you in it," I said. "Smart man," said Mel. We spent the evening making plans. We had 2 divorces to begin and other things to do. We decided to confront our cheating spouses at the party that Andy and I were supposed to be having. Since she would obviously cancel the party, we started making a few calls to make sure the people we needed would be there. I had a few plans to make for myself. I had a friend who'd bought one of those decommissioned squad cars at a police auction. He'd never been able to drive it on the street because he hadn't gotten around to getting the local PD's colors and badges off of it. I also had a couple of friends who owed me a favor and were willing to do anything to get rid of that debt. At 7 p.m., guests started arriving at my house. Fortunately, Andy's parents were the first to arrive. "Mom, Dad, I had to cancel the party tonight," said Andy. She'd been crying and didn't look well. "I know," said her mom. "But Eric called and said we should probably all talk after the party. So we're here. Please tell me that you didn't sleep with another guy while you were barely avoiding a divorce from the first time, Andrea. You couldn't have been that stupid. Could you?" Andy just looked away from her mother. Sandy Cooper was next to arrive, but George wasn't with her. "He was on his way, though," she said. Andy found out that Eric had invited the Coopers as well. She wondered why. Mike showed up a few minutes later with a confused look on his face. He looked around and finally asked Andy where Melissa was. Sally Stevens and her husband Kurt, along with Andy's brother and his wife, were the next to arrive. Tom and Esther Jenkins had called and said they'd be late. Esther wanted to come badly, but Tom seemed to be dragging his feet. There was also another couple who no one seemed to recognize that claimed to have been invited by Eric, but they didn't arrive until nearly 8 o'clock. Sandy couldn't figure out where George was or what was taking him so long to arrive. George was in hell. At 7 o'clock, when Sandy was pulling up in Eric and Andy's driveway, a police car had pulled George over. They made him get out of his car and handcuffed him with his hands behind his back. Then they put him in the back of the squad car and drove around asking him questions. George was sure it was a case of mistaken identity. George couldn't see his watch with his hands behind his back, but he could see that it was beginning to get dark. He knew that Sandy would worry. He asked if he could call his wife. The officers told him that he'd get his phone call after he was booked and charged. He hadn't been arrested yet, only detained. So sit tight. George looked at the clock on the squad car's dashboard and saw that it was nearly 8:15. He had sworn that he'd only been in the car for 20 minutes or so. What George didn't realize was that every time he looked away, the officers moved the dashboard clock ahead 15 minutes. Finally, they drove out to a deserted area and waited. When the dashboard clock read 8:55, the radio squawked, and one of the officers started speaking into it. "What the hell do you mean? You caught him?" screamed the officer. "We've got the scumsucker right here in the back of our squad car." George wondered what was going on. "Okay, buddy, you were right. It's a case of mistaken identity. Sorry to interrupt your night." As the officer uncuffed George, he seemed to be taking a long time to get the cuffs off. Actually, he was resetting George's watch to match the time, 9:05, on the squad car's dashboard. "You're free to go, sir," said the officer. "What do you mean I'm free to go?" said George. "You've driven me way out of my neighborhood and held me for 2 hours. And now you're just going to leave me here?" "Sorry, sir. We're not allowed to carry civilians in the squad car unless they're part of an investigation or a crime," said the cop as he and his partner drove off. "Hey, there's a gas station over there. Call someone to come and get you. Have a pleasant evening, sir." George could have sworn he heard the cops laughing as they drove off. George looked down at his watch. It was after 9 p.m. As George started walking towards the gas station, a guy in a mask stepped out from behind a boarded-up shop. He started walking towards George. "Hey, buddy, I don't have any money or even my wallet," said George. The man didn't talk. He just walked up to George, and without saying a word, punched George in the face so hard that George was stunned. He staggered back and tried to put his hands up while he waited for his equilibrium to stabilize. "What the hell?" said George. The man just punched George again, even harder. George tried to talk, but his jaw hurt. He looked up just in time to get another punch. That third punch knocked George off his feet. George thought that the fight was over and he'd lost. This was the first time that he'd gotten his butt so thoroughly kicked. George was wrong, though. The fight was only beginning. The man came over and started kicking George. He kicked him in his side several times, and George was sure that he'd felt ribs snap. Then that pain was eclipsed as the man found a new target, George's groin. George screamed so loudly that he was sure he could be heard in the next state. Then the man kicked George several times in each leg. But it didn't matter because George had blacked out from the pain. He vaguely remembered being dragged down the street and left very close to the gas station in one of his moments of awareness. He didn't know how long it was until someone found him and called an ambulance. But it seemed like forever. Even though George had been fooled into believing that his butt kicking had started at 9 o'clock, it was actually only 8 o'clock. At 8:45, Eric's Mustang pulled into the driveway. He and Melissa got out and went into the house and out onto the deck. He saw his mother-in-law, father-in-law, and several neighbors. He greeted his wife's family warmly and hugged Sandy Cooper. He nodded to the mysterious couple. Mike came over to talk to Melissa, but she blew him off and followed Eric around. Finally, Andy came downstairs and saw Eric. She ran over to him and tried to hug him, but he pushed her away. "Eric, I forgive you for just running off on me, though I'm not sure why you did it," she said. The rest of the guests politely pretended to be doing other things but were really watching and listening intently. "Wait, you didn't run off alone to think. You were with Melissa, weren't you?" she said. "But why?" "We were just starting to make progress. I was beginning to feel like you loved me a little bit again, and that there was a chance for us to get past our problems." She fell to the floor and started crying. Eric started clapping his hands. "Can everyone come over here for a moment?" he said. Melissa also started clapping her hands. "Everyone give Andy a hand," said Eric. "That was the greatest acting performance in history. Now we know where Andy's true talents lie. I guess everyone here knows that Andy and I have been having a rough time in our marriage. I recently threw her out of the house for a while. Andy told me that she was curious about what it would be like to have sex with another man," said Eric. "I begged her not to do it, but she did anyway. She went out and screwed my former best friend Mike, the husband of her former best friend Melissa. It broke my heart, and I hated her for what she did to us, but I still loved her so much. For the past few weeks, We've been trying to patch up the destruction that Andy's curiosity wrought on our marriage, but it was hard for me. As Andy said, we were just starting out on that long process of fixing things when I noticed my ex-best friend going into my backyard. I followed him and recorded what I found on my phone. Can everyone follow me into the den? Everyone watched as I hooked my iPhone up to the plasma screen TV. They were all shocked as they saw Mike watching as George Cooper and Kurt Stevens screwed Andy while she gave Tom Jenkins a blowjob. The great thing about the iPhone 4 is that it shoots high-resolution video. The images on the screen were very clear. George's and Kurt's lust and Andy's boredom at the act were apparent. Andy's father turned his head and begged me to stop the tape. Andy's mother vomited the contents of her stomach onto the parquet floor tiles of the den. I guess everyone kind of understands why I disappeared a couple of days ago now. What they can't understand is what it feels like to have the person you loved and wanted to spend the rest of your life with hurt you this way twice. I hope you all understand that there won't be a third time. Every bit of love I once felt for her is gone. There's only one way for us to go now. Eric stopped talking and nodded to the mysterious couple. They each produced an envelope from somewhere and handed one to Andy and one to Mike. You've been served, they told them. Tom Jenkins and Kurt Stevens were given envelopes as well. Their envelopes contained their alienation of affection suit papers. Since George wasn't present, the man asked Sandy Cooper, his wife, to please notify him that he was being sued as well. That cheating scum sucker, screamed Sandy as she walked towards the door. No wonder he stood me up. I'm divorcing his cheating scum sucker too. Everyone else headed for the door too. Soon only Mike, Melissa, Eric, Andy, and Andy's parents were still in the room. Eric, it's over. It won't ever happen again, cried Andy. You're right about that, said Eric sadly. Where are you going? Screamed Andy. We have to talk about this. Can still work. I still love you. I only love you. You heard me tell them that on the tape. The only person I like having sex with was you. That was on the tape too. I just needed to find out. It was just my curiosity. She was holding onto Eric's leg. Where do you think you're going? Mike asked Melissa. We need to talk too. I'm not happy about you going off and screwing other guys either. Even after what I did. Two wrongs don't make a right, Melissa. We have bills to pay, woman, and your check didn't make it into our account. Mike reached out and grabbed Melissa's arm and turned her around. You are not leaving with him again, he snapped. We're still married. No divorce and no more sex with other guys. Eric didn't even break his stride. He just turned around and decked Mike. Then put his arm around Melissa and guided her from the room. Melissa turned as she and Eric got to the doorway. You shouldn't worry about me screwing other guys, Mike. I'd never do that. I'm faithful to the man I love. I only made love with Eric. He's the guy and there are no other guys, including you. And I think I got what I wanted. Eric, said Andy's father, I have no idea what you're feeling. I can't believe my daughter is capable of doing what we saw. Take some time to cool down, and we'll all get together and work this out. Eric nodded and he and Melissa left. It was nearly 6 weeks before they would all sit down together again. During that 6 weeks, Eric had no contact with Andy. She'd called him hundreds of times, but the restraining order kept her from being able to go to his job, and she didn't know where he lived. She suspected that he was still with Melissa, and that angered her. She was sure that Eric was falling in love with Melissa and not just screwing her. That, to Andy, was simply not fair. Her curiosity had only been about sex, not love. She'd never had any intention of leaving Eric or falling in love with anyone else. During the 6 weeks, several things happened of note, including Andy having a breakdown of some sort. Eventually, Eric showed up with a truck to get the rest of his belongings and Melissa's. Mike had refused to allow Eric to get them until the police showed up and Eric showed them a court order allowing him to have Melissa's things. Where is that 304? Asked Mike. She's at the doctor's today, smiled Eric. What did you do? Asked Mike. Screw her until her uterus fell out? Just hearing someone talk about Eric having sex with Melissa started Andy on a fit of crying and screaming. Another interesting thing was what happened to Kurt Stevens one Sunday. Kurt was stuck at a red light when an abandoned cement truck plowed into his car, crushing it. At the same time that the accident occurred, both Eric and Melissa had been in church. Eric had gotten up once during the ceremony to use the bathroom and had left the door open. An usher who was actually an off-duty police officer had seen Eric's leg and could vouch for the fact that he was on the toilet the whole time. There was some suspicion about Eric because when George Cooper's beating had been discovered, Eric was the only person George could think of who had a motive to want to hurt him. But at the exact time of the beating, Eric had several witnesses, including George's ex-wife, who could verify that Eric had gotten to the party before 9 and didn't leave the party until long after George's beating had ended. George was sure that his beating had happened at 9 o'clock. The investigating detectives were sure of it as well because even George's watch, which had been broken during the incident, had stopped when it was broken at just after 9. Eric was ruled out. He was also ruled out in Kurt Stevens' case because he couldn't have been in the bathroom under gastric distress and driving the truck at the same time. George would probably never walk again. He also lost both testicles, his wife, and 60% of his assets. His life would never be the same. Kurt was in a coma, and no one was sure he'd ever wake up. If he did, he'd wake up single because his wife divorced him as well. Tom Jenkins didn't wait for his divorce. After finding out what happened to Kurt and George, he just got in his car and drove away. He didn't even pack his clothes, he just disappeared. He spent the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, afraid to settle down or stay in one place for any length of time. He also developed a phobia about married women. He couldn't bear to be around them, no matter how innocent the situation. That was a terrible toll for a B-job. Andy was beautiful, but it just wasn't worth it. At our sit-down meeting, things went pretty much as Melissa and I thought. Both Mike and Andy refused to sign the divorce papers. Melissa gave Mike their house, which he couldn't afford since he wasn't working. He also couldn't afford his truck or their utilities. Mike, at 40 years old, ended up living with his parents for a while and then on the street. I offered Andy the house as well and half of our savings and checking accounts. I paid off her credit cards and offered to pay her a lump sum in lieu of alimony so I wouldn't have to have contact with her. "Eric, can't the two of you work this out somehow?" asked her dad. "She's willing to overlook your revenge affair. We all are. We know what she put you through." "Eric, I'll give up anything to have you back," said Andy. "But you aren't getting this divorce. You will not have it." "Besides," said Andy, "Melissa looks really pretty, but her gut is coming back. Are you sure you want to be stuck with that?" I laughed and reached out, patting Andy on top of her head. "Silly rabbit. That's not a gut," I said. "What is it? Lucky Charms?" smiled Andy. "Nope. It's a baby," said Melissa, rubbing her stomach. "I told you I got what I wanted." Immediately after that, Mike threw up. That was when Andy checked out mentally and had to be hospitalized. "I'll kill you, you witch!" she screamed as she jumped across the table at Melissa. That was the last time I saw her until she showed up at the hospital this morning. Melissa was still asleep, so I went down to the gift shop to get her more flowers, even though there was no room for them anywhere. I wanted her to know just how much I loved her and how special our daughter was to me. When I got back to her floor, the area outside Melissa's room was full of people running around. I saw at least 5 security people and several real police officers. After a few moments, I saw them taking Andy away in handcuffs. Later, I found out that Andy had gone into Melissa's room, supposedly to drop off a card. The ever-watchful nurses had seen Andy on their video monitor, trying to suffocate Melissa while she slept. 2 of the nurses had gone into the room and pulled her off of Melissa while another called security. Andy ended up back in the mental institution for who knows how long. We do know that she will be there for at least 10 years. That's the good news. That crazy witch and her curiosity will be away from us for a long time. The bad news is that in our state, you can't pursue any type of legal action against a person who is not mentally capable. That means, unfortunately, that I'm still married to her. I was able to get my house back. Melissa and I live there. She finally got a teacher's assistant to help with the grading of all those papers. So our nights are free to sit on our deck and enjoy each other. We often go down by the lake and stroll along the water's edge because, darn it, it is kind of romantic. but I keep an eye out for guys who want to throw stuff at us out of jealousy. We named our daughter Curiosity because if it hadn't been for curiosity, she wouldn't have been born. Life is good.